Hello, NorthRoad. I'm Dean McDonald, and I want to tell you a story about how I reset my life about 3.5 years ago. I want to reset my life, kind of get my priorities back in the order that they should be. To back up, when I got out of college in the late 90s, I had taken a job with a local company here, and it was a family-owned company. And I, of course, like most young people coming out of college, I wanted to be the best, that I could. I wanted to kind of be known. I wanted to be known for doing a good job, and I wanted to be successful. So, in the industry I was in, it was changing a lot when I got in there, and I just soaked up all the changes, and really I didn't say no to a lot of things when I was asked to do them. I kept wanting more and more responsibility, and I wanted to be better and better at what I did. I continued to put the time in that it took, and fast forward just a few years, I ended up becoming the vice president of that company, and that's exactly what I'd wanted, And as I became the vice president, I felt like there's a lot of more responsibility and a lot of burden on me to be successful, and I wanted to prove to everybody that I had what it took to be successful, to make our company, X amount profitable, to be bigger and grow larger. So, I just kept taking on more and more, and our business grew, and we did well, and the money came, and a lot of perks came, and then the industry, in the backup, there's a lot of stress involved, and I just continued to deal with it. And every year I thought, well, next year will be better, and the following year I would say the same thing. My next year is going to be better, and I won't have quite as much stress. And from early stage in this process, I saw that it was pushing my family away from me. Not drastically, but I saw the distance that I was putting between us, with my kids and my wife. And then, as the industry that I was in became kind of tougher and tougher, it kind of became a dog-eat-dog kind of world. I just had more and more drive to fight through it. So it cost more and more hours at work. I became just really almost consumed with my job, and to the point that even when my kids and my wife would talk to me, I would be looking at them but not really listening. I slept with my phone at night. It was really underneath the pillow, and I took a lot of late night calls and just continued to do everything I could to be successful. And I don't know if it was more of a pride issue or a fear of failure, but 15 years later from the time I started, I was 100% consumed in my work, and my priorities had been completely rearranged. I'd said the whole time that my family was my priority, but my actions definitely proved differently. And this continued and continued, and my family was very, very understanding. They weren't coming out and saying that it was a huge issue, but I just saw the distance getting farther and farther and farther. And in 2013 kind of came the turning point for myself, where I really, really understood that my priorities were messed up. And my youngest daughter was not in school yet, but my older two kids were in school, and they went to a private school, and every Easter they would have a dinner, and they would each get to invite one or two people, and it would usually be myself and a grandparent, or myself and Melinda and a couple of grandparents. And that Easter at school, I knew they were having the dinner, and I didn't get invited that year. So I don't know I can't remember if I asked my wife or one of my kids. I'm like, hey, how come Dad didn't get invited this year? And whoever it was, I can't remember who said it. One of them said, because we didn't think you'd have time to go. And that was that was a turning point in my life where I knew that there was nothing wrong with being successful or doing what it took to work hard, but I knew that my priorities were messed up. So I made a decision. A couple weeks later, a couple events took place that opened up a door for me, and God just really placed a opportunity in my lap, and I made a decision that I was gonna walk away from being the vice president of this company. I knew at that phase in my life that, and where I was, that I could not change unless I walked away from that position. So I did that. I took a job. I gave the company 6 weeks, and 6 weeks later, I took a job that I currently have now, and really brought back the priorities that I had said that I said were number one in my life. And I spent more time with my family now, and I have more time for my wife and my kids. And when they talk to me, most of the time, I'm paying attention to what they're saying. And it was it was an opening that only God could have given to me. And I don't regret the decision one bit. Life is not about how much money you can make or how successful you can be. Being successful is important, but getting your priorities right, and seeking God first, and then your family, and then work can come after that. And anyway, that's the story how I reset my life 3 years ago by putting my family back on the top.
Well, good morning. How's everybody doing? Man, it's good to be with you guys this morning as we kind of get into the second week we call Reset. We are going to look for the next 4 weeks, last week, this week, 2 more weeks, we're going to look at how there are some ways in our life that if we can push the reset button, it can make tremendous differences in who we are. So we're going to look at how we reset our time and our priorities and our marriage and our self. And so today we're going to look at priorities. And if you got your Bibles, I'm going to go ahead and tell you where to go because it's going to take you a little bit to get there. Last week we were in the minor prophet of Joel. This week we're going to be looking at the minor prophet of Haggai. And some people say Haggai, but it's Haggai. Anyway, it's in the Old Testament. He's one of the minor prophets. He was I think he's the second oldest minor prophet that is in the Bible. So it'll take you a second to get there. So while you're getting there, I'm going to tell you a couple stories. Before I was a pastor, I was a youth pastor, and I got to hang out with kids, and kids always say funny things. They always do crazy things, and then sometimes they just kind of wow you, right? And they just kind of drop your jaw. Like, for example, I had a group of girls. We had this group of leader students, and for some reason, we had a group of boys going in a car, and I happened to drop the lucky straw of taking all the girls. And we were heading down to Kansas City to stay in this hotel and do like a mission retreat. And on our way down, we see a homeless guy on the side of the road. This is a true story. I cannot make this up. We see a homeless guy on the side of the road, and all the girls in our car, they go, "Oh, he's homeless. Man, we got to stop. We got to help this guy." I mean, their hearts were like going out to this man. And all of a sudden, Liz, who was she got like a 35 on her ACT. You ever meet those people that get like a 30-something on their ACT, but when it comes to social awareness, there's none, right? Liz was brilliant. I mean, she probably got a 35 on her ACT. She went off to some Ivy League school. But she goes, "Wait a minute. I'm not giving him any money." And all the girls go, "Why? Why? He's a homeless guy. Why wouldn't you help him?" Look at his sign. It says, "God bless, I'm a vet. And if he's a veterinarian, he can get a job. He's got a degree." And I'm like, really? Did she really just say that? And what was funny was all the other girls go, "That's true, he is a veterinarian." All right. But I had this other kid that came in my group, that's one of 1,000 stories, but one of the ones that really stuck with me when I was a youth pastor was this kid who at the age of about 12 years old got stage 4 cancer and was told he was going to die. And God rescued his life and saved him and put him back perfectly, actually. And when he got back to normal health, one time we were hanging out, and for the next month I saw him carrying a marble, and it was a different colored marble every single time I saw him. So I went up to him and I said, "Hey, dude, why the marbles? What's up with the marble?" He goes, after I was told that I was in complete remission, that I was going to be okay, he goes, I carry a marble every day. He goes, I went home and I calculated my life. He goes, if I live to be 75 years old, which I guess in his mind was about the age that a person lives if you're 74. Don't worry about that. I'm sure you'll go way past that. Anyway, but he figured out like 75 or 80, and he made up a bucket of marbles for every single day for the next however many years, from I think he was like 14 or 15 at the time, up to 75. And every day that he lived, he took a marble out of the jar to remind himself that this day had incredible importance to him. Because, see, here's what kind of happens in our lives. We kind of come to a point in our life where we kind of get this feeling of invincibility, don't we? Life happens. We have successes in our lives. Our kids come along. We get just kind of what we would call that American dream, and we start thinking, man, I'm good. I mean, that person over there, they're not doing so great, and maybe that person has some issues, but my life is really good. And what ends up happening when we get into this phase of life is we start thinking, hey, I'm kind of invincible. And when we become that feeling of invincibility, then all of a sudden, the first thing that tends to go is our need and our desperation for God. I mean, think about it. When you're most desperate for God, it's in the moments when you're in the most desperate situations. If you become undesperate in your life, sometimes your life goes on to fill in other things in your life besides God. You don't do this intentionally. It's just kind of the distractions of the world that have a tendency to pull on us, right? What I want to talk to you today is I want to ask you a hard question. I don't know where life meets you. You might be sitting there right now and going, man, I am right in the midst of what you're talking about. In my life, I've never been more desperate for God. But some of you may be sitting there going, you know what, life has gotten so busy. I've had so many things going on. I've added so many things to the schedule. I just feel overwhelmed. I feel far from God. Man, this message is for you. It may be time for you to make a reset, okay? So if you got your Bibles, the book of Haggai, I want you to open up that page. In mine, it is page 619. It will not be in yours, though. All right, so here's who Haggai was, just to give you a little bit of background. Haggai was the second oldest prophet. He comes at a very crucial time in which the Israelites have just been freed by the Persians. Now, understand, the Israelites were taken into captivity by the Babylonians. About 50 years they lived in captivity of the Babylonians, and then the Persians came in, kicked the tail of the Babylonians and said, what do we want with all these Jewish people? If you want to go, you can go. And the Jewish people had an opportunity at this moment to go, we are going to push the reset button in our life, and we're going to go back to the promised land that God created us from the beginning. And so they take this huge pilgrimage, and they come home to the promised land, and the first thing they do is they set up an altar to God, and they set up a place to worship him. And they're getting ready to build the temple when the Samaritans come in, and there's this, if you know the Bible, there's this lifelong, just war between the Samaritans and the Israelites, where the Israelites go, man, we don't need your help. Or the Samaritans come in, they say, hey, we want to help you build the temple. And the Israelites say, no, we don't want your help. And the Samaritans get offended, and they go at great lengths to stop the Israelites from building their temple. The Israelites feel this tension, and they go, man, we just got back. We can worship God any way he needs to be worshiped. We'll be fine. We're just going to go on about life. And that's what they did. They started building their life back. They started building their homes. They started creating jobs. They started just doing what we do, which is live, right? And God sends Haggai with a message, and here's his message. Haggai chapter 1, verse 1. In the second year of Darius the king, in the 6th month, on the first day of the month, the word of the Lord came by the hand of Haggai, the prophet of Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. Here's what he said. Thus says the Lord of hosts, these people say the time has not yet come to rebuild the house of the Lord. Then the word of the Lord came by the hand of Haggai the prophet, and he said this, is it time for you yourselves to dwell in paneled houses while the house of God lies in ruins? Now therefore, says the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. You've sown much, you've harvested little. You've ate, but you've never had enough. You drink, but you never have your fill. You clothe yourself, but you never feel warm. And you earn wages, but you put them in bags that have holes. So here's what's going on. I just kind of want to paraphrase for you what I just read because it's very easy for you to go, huh? Right? Here's what happened. God comes to them and he goes, you've been saying for a long time, we'll do this tomorrow. we'll build that temple tomorrow. I mean, I got a job over here, and I got a house I need to build over here, and the kids are really busy at school. And you know what, God, I know you want your temple, but the Samaritans put this pressure on us. We will build that temple tomorrow. And God says, how can you keep saying tomorrow, right? When you're building up these paneled houses for yourself, these really nice houses, but the house of God lies in ruins. In other words, you have forgotten why you came here in the first place. Think about it for a second. When you gave your life to Christ, or you got serious about your walk with God, right? You put God at the forefront of everything that you were, right? Okay. And time in life just kind of happens. And what we do is we have this only so many hours in a day, and so what we start doing is we go, hey, God, I know that you want this, but I need to fit this in, and I need to fit this in, and I need to fit this in, and God, I'm going to have to move you over here for just a little bit, just for a season, and then I'll put you back in. Have you ever had to work on your house, or you got a new job, or your kids played sports, or you had something come up in your life that was really all-encompassing, and you said, it's just a season. We'll be back to church in a little while. We'll be back to doing the things of God in a little while. But for right now, we're just really busy, and it's really hard to get there. And you know what? Tomorrow we'll do that. That is exactly what was happening in the life of the Israelites. They weren't doing bad stuff. They just didn't have the right things at the top of the priority list. So here's my question for you. How's your priorities? Well, how do you answer that question? My life feels pretty good. Here's how you answer that question. Where is God in your life right now? Are you close to him? Are you seeking after him? Is he included in everything that you do? Or is he an afterthought that you get to when you have time? Here's what God said through Haggai to the people if we do that. You ready? Verse 6. Actually, verse 5. Now, therefore, thus says the Lord, think about what you're doing. What does our life tell us to do sometimes? It tells us just to kind of run as fast as we can. Run that 100-mile-an-hour race. I mean, how many of you guys go to McDonald's and when it takes too long, you get frustrated, right? Yeah, because we run a very fast-paced lifestyle, right? And that's what the world kind of encourages us to do. And what happens is we get sped up so fast that we can get going and we never stop and take a 20,000 square foot view of our life and go, is what I'm doing healthy? Here's what God said. Consider your ways. Take a long, hard look. When I was a kid in college, they used to have these posters. And if you looked at them, they just looked like a square of a blur. Do you guys remember these? And they had 3 dots in the middle. And you would sit there and you would stare at it, and you would have to cross your eyes, right? So that the 2 dots would become 1. And if you stared at it long enough, what would happen? Anybody remember these? This 3D image would pop out of your face. You remember these? Am I the only person in the room? Okay, good. I'm not the only person. This 3D image would pop out, and you'd be like, whoa, I never saw it like that before. I mean, if you glanced at it, would just walk by, you would never see it. But if you stopped and you really just intensely looked at it, it would just kind of go, whoom, and it would just pop out at you. I don't think we spend enough time in our lives really evaluating, considering, are our priorities in the right place? So God looks at the Israelites through Haggai and he says this, consider your ways. Consider what's happened in the last few years since you've been home in the promised land. And here's what he said to them. You've sown a lot, but you've harvested little. In other words, you've worked hard, but you don't have a whole lot to show for it. You eat, but you never have enough. You always wish you had more. You ever feel like that in your life? Like, you know what, if I could just have what the neighbor has, or if I could just win the lottery, man, if I won the lottery, that would be fantastic. I could do so much, right? You drink, but you're never filled. You clothe yourself, but you're never warm enough. And he who earns wages to put them, he only puts them in a bag full of holes. You know what that means? Here's what that means. That I'm running this rat race, and I'm doing everything I can to be successful at it. But every single time I run, it feels like I never have enough. I've never accomplished enough. I'm never satisfied enough. There's always this void that needs to be filled. If in your life you feel that way, there's a very good chance that you need to reset the priorities of your life. And you may look at me and you go, Matt, but my priorities aren't bad. I mean, I'm doing this to help people. I'm serving in the community. I'm doing this. I'm taking my kids to sports. I'm doing all these different things. Man, we can do a lot of things, and they can be completely unhealthy. Let me give you an example. I worked with a pastor, right, a preacher, who had a son who was really good at sports. And so he would take him everywhere he wanted to go to play football or to play baseball or to play basketball. Kid was a fantastic athlete. He played Division I football when he got older. But here was the cost of that. One day we're in student ministry, and I'm talking to one of his sisters, and his sister says to me, I just feel like I'm forgotten by my parents. And I said, why? And she goes, because I go and I sit at game after game after game after game, and I hear my dad cheer for my brother, and I know he's so proud of him, but he never does anything with me. My life consists of traveling from stadium to stadium to stadium so my dad can help my brother live out his dream, and I feel like I'm completely forgotten. And I thought, wow, I know my buddy. He didn't go into that trying to forget about his other child. He just got his priorities mixed up because he so badly wanted to see success, and his son was trying to chase it, and it was never enough. And so the dream became bigger and more consuming, and it took more time to accomplish at the cost of a lot. God says to him, consider your ways. Think about it for a second. Is the job you got, like Dean, that's taking so much time that maybe your kids don't feel like they have a dad or a mom, is it really worth it? Would it make sense to make a little bit less money so that when you die, your kids go, we may not have had a lot, but my mom and dad were fantastic people. Man, some of you guys are going, we got this house and we're working on it and we're trying so hard and we haven't been able to focus or to serve or to teach our kids how to be godly. Is it really that important to have a fantastic house if you don't have time for God? Is it really that important to have that perfect yard if you don't have time for God? Is it really that important to be there every Tuesday, every Thursday, every Saturday at the softball field if you don't have time for your family and time to put into them who God is? That is what it means to check our priorities. Now, stop here. Think about this for a second. Is it bad to play softball? Absolutely not. Is it bad to have a sports dream? Absolutely not. Is it bad to have a great job? No. Is it illegal to have, in the eyes of God, to have a nice house? Absolutely not. It is when things get out of whack that you have to consider your ways. Think about this for a moment. Why is Haggai here? Haggai is here because the Israelites said, I want to go back to the promised land. I want to reset my ways. I want to reset my priorities. I want to make God first. They hit a little bit of adversity, and all of a sudden they're going this direction, they're going this direction, they're going this direction, trying to fill the void without going to the place that they came for in the first place, which was to put God right in the middle of everything that they are. They came home to fix their priorities, and then the priorities kind of got skewed. You may be in the same situation where you go, man, the whole reason we came to NorthRoad was because we were resetting our life and we were resetting our priorities, and now our priorities are all askew again. It's very easy to happen. That's why God says, look at the next thing he says, verse 7. He tells them again, take another 20,000 square foot view. Therefore, he says, consider your ways. What would happen, verse 8, if you go up to the hills and bring wood and you build that house that I may take pleasure in it? Hear what God is saying. He's not, I don't believe, God is so concerned about the temple in our life as far as building a building. Understand Old Testament to New Testament. In the Old Testament, if you wanted to meet with God, you went to the priest, you told him what you wanted God to know. The priest went into the Holy of Holies and he took it to God. When Jesus came into the picture, we no longer need the building. We no longer need the priest. We only need a relationship with Jesus. We need to get on our knees and just talk to him. So what Jesus is saying, or what God is saying through Haggai right here is very clear. He's saying, you need to go back to your first love. You need to go back to talking with me. You need to go back to making me first in your life. Because if I'm first in your life, things will go better. Can I ask you a question? How many of you would honestly say, if I like my life, but I'm just not satisfied. I like who I am, but I just wish that there's just something missing. When was the last time you considered your ways? When was the last time you thought, you know what? What if we took God and we just made him central to everything that we do? I want to show you what happened for the people in the book of Haggai. Chapter 2, verse 20. So here's what happens. There's a guy named Zerubbabel, okay, who is like the governor at the time, and he tells the people, man, Haggai makes a lot of sense here, and we need to reestablish the priorities of our town, our area, okay? And he sets to make the temple, and they get serious about putting God first in their town again, okay? And I want to read you what God's response is. It's really important that we see this. Haggai chapter 2, verse 20. The word of the Lord came a second time to Haggai on the 24th day of the month. I want you to go speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah. And I want you to say to him, I'm about to shake the heavens and the earth. I'm about to overthrow the thrones of kingdoms. I'm about to destroy the strength of the kingdom of the nations. I'm about to overthrow the chariots and their riders, and the horses and their riders shall go down, every one by the sword of his brother. And listen to this. This is so cool. And on that day declares the Lord of hosts, I will take you, O Zerubbabel. You are my servant, the son of Shealtiel, declares the Lord, and I will make you like a signet ring, for I have chosen you, declares the Lord. Now, listen to this. Don't miss this. This is so cool. In the days of the Old Testament, when there were kings, if a king had a signet ring and he pressed it in wax and he put it on a piece of paper, nothing that ring approved could be undone or taken away, right? I want you to go back and I want you to think about Daniel in the lion's den. Why did he go into the lion's den? Do you remember this? Because the king sealed it with his signet ring and he said, I cannot undo what has been done, right? Now God, through the book of Haggai, just compared, okay, Zerubbabel, who reset everything in his life, as the equivalent of God's signet ring. Basically saying, whatever you place your hand to, Zerubbabel, will be done. Why? Because Zerubbabel had taken God and placed him at the very point of his life and made him first. What do we do sometimes? Man, if I could only accomplish, if I could only gather, if I could only just have success in. And we say if only so many times. And what we need to do is stop and say, I wonder what would happen if God was number one. How would my life look different if God was on top? Trickling down through everything that I did. There was a professor in a college, and he wanted to help his kids understand priorities. And so he brings in this cylinder, this clear glass cylinder, and he takes these 3 huge rocks, right? And he fills up the cylinder with these 3 huge rocks. And he looks at his class and he goes, is the cylinder full? And they go, looks full. And he goes, no, it's not. And he took gravel and he pours gravel over the 3 huge rocks until it looks like that thing is completely filled up. And he looks at him and he goes, is it full? And they go, no, or yeah, it looks full. And he goes, no, it's not. And he takes sand and he pours sand, and the sand just kind of fills all the crevices of the gravel, and all around the big rocks, you just kind of see the sand overtake. And they look at him and they go, he goes, is it full now? And they kind of catch on to him and they go, no, it's not full. And he goes, man, good job. And he takes some water and he pours the water over the sand, over the gravel, over the big rocks, and he fills that thing to the rim. And he goes, what's the moral of that story? And they said to him, they go, the moral of that story is you can always fit more into your life. And he goes, nope, that's not the moral of this story. He goes, had I taken the water and the gravel and the sand and put it in first, the big rocks would have never fit. I had to take the things that mattered the most and I had to put them into my life first. And then everything else had its place. But had I put all the little frivolous things in first, the big, huge moments that matter the most, the people, our relationship with God, our marriage, our kids, if I don't put them in first, there'll never be space for them. Can I ask you a really hard question? In your cylinder, you have a lot of things. Is God in there? Is the priority of your family in there? Is your wife or your husband in there? Or has life just kind of happened? And you're like, tomorrow I'm going to fix that relationship. Tomorrow I'm going to put my kids first. Tomorrow I'm going to make God the center of my universe. There was a song that came out when I was a kid by a guy named Harry Chapin. You guys know it? And the Cat's in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon. And it talks all about how, he raised his kids saying, tomorrow, 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 tomorrow. He who finds everything he wants in life finds it because of his relationship in God. And he will only find it when he pushes a hard reset. It says, I'm going to make hard choices, and I'm going to cut things out of my life, and I'm going to empty my cylinder, and I'm going to refill it, and I'm going to put rocks, the ones that matter, in first. Some of you, let's be honest, you need to dump out your cylinder and start over, don't you? And there's times in my life when I've had to dump out my cylinder and just start over fresh so that God could be at the forefront. Will you do me a favor? Will you bow your head and close your eyes for just a second? As the band comes up, I just got a simple question for you. You ready? Very simple. How's your priorities? Are you busy? Does all the things that keep you busy, do they seem really important and really good and not so bad? But is God anywhere in the midst of those things? Is God number one? Is your family right there at or your wife, brother, or your husband right there at number two? Is your family right there at number three? Or do you have a lot of number threes and a lot of number twos, and you have a lot of things that compete for number one? Where are you at? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take 15 seconds, and I just want you to, 20 seconds, however long you need, and just say, hey, God, I know I have a lot of things in my life. Do they honor you? Consider your ways. Look at them hard. Are your priorities where they need to be? Now here's the question. If your priorities aren't where they need to be, let me tell you about a verse in James that I brought up last week. Here's what it says. God resists the proud, but God gives grace to those who are humble enough to say, I need to push the reset button. And if your priorities have been out of whack, if God has not been number one, if maybe some project you're working on, or your job, or just sports, or anything has just been like that priority, and God needs to go back in the top seat, and you know that, I want to challenge you to be humble enough just to say, hey, God, my priorities are messed up. And I want to challenge you right now. If that's you, just raise your hand. I simply want to pray for you. Matt, I need to work on my priorities. Okay, awesome. It's okay to be honest. Anybody else? Matt, my priorities are out of whack. You put your hand down once you raise it. I just want to pray for you. Dear Jesus, I just thank you for loving us. And I thank you for the humility that it took for these people to raise their hand and say, you know what, I've got to make some adjustments. I pray, God, for those who sit in here that know they need to make adjustments and they just don't, they just feel like they're too tired, or it's just going to take too much effort, or they're going to have to make some hard choices to put you first. God, I pray that you give them strength. Strength that maybe they didn't have today to raise their hand, but maybe tomorrow they would have to change their priorities. For those that raise their hand, God, I just thank you for their humility. I pray, God, that you would honor that humility, that you would give them exactly what they're asking for, and that is a readjustment, a reset in their life, and that, God, like Zerubbabel, that, God, you would give them the signet ring, that whatever they touch is honored by you because they put you number one. Father, I ask that, God, in your name, for your sake, I pray it. Amen. Let's stand.